Well, join the party here, yes.
I know I'm bringing one of them to the thing.
A little warm, we got the fans going, so feel free, let me know if you want to kick any up or. Yeah.
I know. Something with her.
Let me enjoy the springs. I love my spring, let me.
Yeah.
Joe, or somebody put an outlet along that wall?
It's right there behind that, right at the corner,
There's nothing over there.
nothing over there now. But it's perfect for vacuuming because you got the the one right under the fire extinguisher there. Then for that back half, then you get that for the middle, then this one right here for this end. So it's perfect. Don't need an extension cord.
I was just thinking, you and Sister Mia, whatever happened, maybe throw the fan,
Oh,
at the end of the pew.
well,
Yeah,
you know what?
those are thoughts.
I know it's not the church.
It's
I
okay.
went and bought one of those little ones that goes around your neck. Like
Yeah.
the tourists, and it blows right in my face. I had to buy it for work.
Mother, brother, has one, yeah.
And it does, they made one that went like around your neck, but it was too short. I guess I have a big neck, and so it blew like this way, so I bought one that goes on a little.
Then they did a 5-gallon backpack and you could.
Yeah.
I look like a tourist.
Camel packs.
It looked like a tourist.
For me, I'd feel like the thing on my neck was too hot, even though it had a fan at the end of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I really don't. It's uncomfortable.
All righty. Glad to have church members here and glad to have church members reaching out who can't be here. All righty. So we are in our Wednesday evening discussions, taking a look at the Josiah Manifesto and the Bible. We are looking at latest book, came out a few months ago in September from Messianic Jewish Rabbi Jonathan Cahn. And we've looked at biblical connections with some current events and had some good discussions on that. And we are now at the end of that, heading into our upcoming discussion, going through the rest of the book of Revelation, chapter 4 forward. Before we get to that, we're finishing off this manifesto part of the Josiah Manifesto. This is just Jonathan Cahn's basic, his thoughts on the state, as I've mentioned, basically 3 parts. The state of events right now, the state of the union, the current events, and the status of things, and the shape of things spiritually, are scriptural reaction response to those things, but then not stopping at being reactionary, how we are to be going forward in a positive perspective, and the light overcoming darkness and all that stuff. So those are kind of his thoughts, and this manifesto put together. We'll see the scriptures referenced, and some of these thoughts and kind of remind me of some other scriptures. So I've got some added that he didn't. But anyway, the manifesto part of the Josiah Manifesto. This is where we left off last time. If it is, yes. Start from this slide. There we go. And show you the slideshow part of the slide. And there we go. That's what we want to see. So we left off with this part of the manifesto. In times of evil, the righteous will stand in the minority. They must not fear the majority. Conform to it. Be silenced by it. Be intimidated by it. Or in any way be moved because of it. They must neither seek its approval nor fear its reproach. The greatest of man's evils have been committed or made possible by the majority. Majority has no moral authority. But the ways of God are true and right, and the one who stands in them will be greater than the majority. And again, this is just the writings of the man, Jonathan Cahn. Feel free to disagree with him, disagree with me. I don't see eye to eye with him on everything. This is all just for conversation starters as we deal with the world around us and be prepared in advance heading into where things are going. But before moving on from this slide, any reactions or other further thoughts on what's said here about majority and minority and all of that? Yeah.
Pretty much in the Bible.
It is, yeah.
So it's not anything new that he's had.
Exactly.
Taking credit for it or whatever, that's,
And that's what I want to make sure of. I'm glad you see that, and that means a lot to me because it shows that we've got enough familiarity. We could always gain more, and we want more, but it's important to have enough familiarity with what's scriptural, what's not, even if we can't cite chapter and verse. We know it when we hear it. And so to be able to recognize, even though I might not know what verse says this or that or the other thing, I recognize these concepts are in keeping with scripture. And not only that, the scriptural application, it does relate to what we deal with in our daily lives around us and what we see kind of going on the big picture. So yeah, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Anything else on this? Well, let's move on. Our first scripture, there's actually one that occurred to me, Luke chapter 22. And that will be brought out with our next slide here. There we go. Here's the next section of the manifesto. Here are his thoughts. To fear evil is to empower it and weaken the good. The one who fears evil will be more apt to surrender to it and be mastered by it. Therefore, the righteous must never be shaken by the power of evil, no matter how great that power appears to be, or how weak the power of the good appears to be. They must remember that in the end, evil is powerless and good is almighty, as the Almighty is good. The righteous must fear no evil. So the reason I had Luke 22 on the brain and heart, let's go to verses 52 and 53. This is at the arrest of Jesus. There's something he says here, and that was drawn to my mind by those words of Jonathan Cons. So Luke 22, verse 52. Jesus said to the chief priests and officers of the temple and elders who had come against him, have you come out with swords and clubs as you would against a man inciting a revolt? While I was with you daily in the temple, you did not lay hands on me. But this hour and the power of darkness are yours. Or some translations, this present darkness. And so and that has always struck me, Christ making that statement there at the time of his arrest. And so what led me to that passage in relation to these words from the Josiah Manifesto, the power of darkness. Jonathan Cahn is making the observation that we are not to fear evil, even when it seems all powerful and we feel or see that the good seems powerless. Jesus Christ said at the time of his arrest, the power of darkness is yours, this present time. So he recognized that there are times, and so Jesus was proclaiming, there are times and seasons where it seems like darkness is prevailing. But he says, this present time, this moment, this hour and the power of darkness are yours. This hour, this present is fleeting, is passing. It's temporary. And I appreciate the point made here. In the end, evil is powerless. Evil may seem pretty powerful right now with some of the things that are happening that are moving along and persuading, not to get on soapboxes or social tirades, but did y'all see Boy Scouts of America is no longer Boy Scouts of America?
No.
Oh yeah, it's now Scouting America. They dropped the boy from Boy Scouts. Yeah.
To be more inclusive.
Yes, exactly. And so that's just one of those many areas where we see godly design and godly function and godly nature is just being erased and sidestepped and watered down. And they're going for the kids again. And so when I read things like that, I think, wow, there's another one for evil. And where it sounds, oh, loving and all inclusive. No, if it's contrary to God, it's harmful and it's evil. This is harmful and detrimental. And as we know, people wrestling with those things most of the time are not happy people or are not in happy circumstances. So it's harmful, especially we talked in recent weeks. Kids don't know what they're doing. We didn't know what we were doing. The brain doesn't fully form until you're 25 or so. And even then, I made plenty of mistakes at 25 and afterwards. So we get the point. But what struck me here in these words of the manifesto are evil might seem powerful at any given time, but it's temporary. And God is the ultimate good, and he is everlasting. No evil is going to outlast God. He is the spiritual energizer bunny. Nothing's going to outlast or outshine him. Evil won't be able to stand or endure in his presence. So while it can be disheartening, we could feel discouraged, know that the God who is untouched and unfazed by all these things is the one who outlasts all these things, and he's the one we're signed up with and drawn close to. So as long as we stay tight with him, we will overcome and override this evil that passes just as he does. So any reactions or observations to the thoughts on this portion of the manifesto here? Let's talk about fear. Let's talk about fear. I fear things. I fear things happening. I fear things happening to me. There are things I don't want. I don't like pain. I don't like getting injured. There are all sorts of things. I like to know we're okay financially. I like to know we're okay health-wise. We like all these things. So I fear not being okay financially. I fear not being okay health-wise, all those different things we can talk about. But spiritually speaking, there's a natural human fear versus a spiritual fear. To fear evil. Yeah, I'm afraid of what evil can do. I've do to me and my family and my church. I've seen what evil does in this world. So yeah, I have a fear of that. But we are not to live in that fear. And that's the difference. And that brings us to scripture. Jonathan Cahn does reference Psalm 23, naturally. Psalm 23. Because my initial reaction reading this is, well, some of those things are scary. And aren't we supposed to be afraid of some of those things and to fear those things? We're actually called not to. And then we'll talk about how we're empowered and equipped to not be in fear. So Psalm 23, 23rd Psalm, very famous Psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd. I will not be in need. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for the sake of his name. And verse 4 is the key that relates here. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. We'll read the rest. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You have anointed my head with oil. My cup overflows. Certainly, goodness and faithfulness will follow me all the days of my life, and my dwelling will be in the house of the Lord forever. So,
Amen.
I will fear no evil. Jonathan Cahn makes this observation. The answer to fear is not the absence of evil. So I think, okay, if I'm afraid of evil, then if there's no evil, phew, okay, I don't have to be afraid. But it doesn't take just the removal of evil. The removal of evil is not the only thing that removes fear. We can have fear removed even when evil is present. That's what David was talking about. Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. So how can we overcome fear even in the presence of evil and death? Jonathan Cahn says, the answer to fear is not the absence of evil, but the presence of God. What did he say in the Psalm? I fear no evil, for you are with me. You know me, I'm a Green Lantern guy. What are the two requirements to be a Green Lantern? Anyone can be a Green Lantern. You don't have the people who are called to be Green Lanterns don't have superpowers. To be chosen, the ring chooses you. The ring chooses you, kind of like King Arthur's sword. The ring chooses you. What are the two characteristics? The ability to overcome fear. It's not that you don't have fear, the ability to overcome fear and to have integrity. So if you've got integrity of character and you've got the ability to overcome fear, you might be chosen as a Green Lantern someday, just so you know. And so it's not being free from all the things that would cause fear that removes fear. No, it's the presence of God and having the will of being found in the will of God. The power of a Green Lantern is willpower, that resolve to overcome evil with the light of goodness. And so to hear the ability for us to overcome evil and not be afraid in the presence of evil is to know that we are standing in the will of God. And that he has got us and is with us, and he's the one who preserves us and sees us through. Again, evil is temporary. The most biggest, baddest, worst evil in the world is temporary. And it won't last in the presence of God. So he gives the example. It was in the presence of God. It was the presence of God that caused David to overcome an evil giant. It is the presence of God that is the antidote to fear. So the idea here is the more we draw near to God, the more we are in close fellowship and relationship with God, even intimately so. He is near and dear and close to us, walks with me, talks with me, all these things. The more we are really aware of and recognizing and sensing and feeling the real presence of God. I'm not talking imaginary playmate. I'm not talking about wishful thinking. I'm talking we are in such communication and fellowship with him where we know he is with us. That presence of God with us is the antidote to the fear of evil. Sometimes easier said than done, but does that make scriptural sense?
There's,
Yeah.
thinking about the psalm, even though it's one of our hymns that we sing, talk about the rod and the staff. That's the shepherd's rod and staff,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So,
The Lord is my shepherd with his rod and staff.
right. So there's comfort
Yeah.
in that for the sheep,
Mhm.
right? Because those are used for protection,
Yeah.
for
The
guidance.
rod is kind of a weapon, and then the staff to guide.
Yeah, so it's.
Protection, pull out. Yeah,
So there's comfort in that,
absolutely.
and I think sometimes that our flesh is just so weak and scared at whatever
Mhm.
is, coming at us. And I think I just want to preference and say I do think there are healthy fears.
Yes.
Because when we do have fears, it keeps us from, we avoid things that would harm us,
Yeah, the Butlers have encouraged us. There are some books that on parenting called The Gift of Fear. About teaching our children to fear the traffic. Don't just walk in the street.
Right. Yeah.
And stranger danger and all those things.
To fear, but
Yeah.
we're talking on the spiritual, level here. And I think that if we can just remember that
Mhm.
he is protecting us and comforting us, and even if bad things do happen, we'll get on the other side of it.
Exactly.
So there's just, for me, it was just one of the ways to overcome fear is to think of comfort, that God is, very present.
I really appreciate that. And as I'm listening to you, what you're inspiring in my heart is, how do we relate fear of God with this? We're not to fear evil. I think fear is a recognition of bigness. The bigger something is, the more we might be in fear of it. If we see God as bigger than any evil we're seeing or dealing with, then it's easier to fear or recognize his bigness in the presence of that. Fear God more than we fear the evil around us. And that healthy perspective, that healthy fear of God, while we're joyfully in his fellowship and presence, is going to be, in fact, the scripture says, the joy of the Lord is your strength. One of my favorite verses. So I think the more we can stay in that relationship, the more we can recognize, yes, we are going to have fear is going to strike us and hit us, but then what do we do with it?
Well, I think even with fearing God, I know I've come across people who struggle with that. Well, what am I supposed to be afraid of him? And for me, it's like being afraid of your parent, right?
Yeah.
When you're a kid, you don't not love your parent,
Right.
but you want to please your parent. You don't want your parent to be upset with you. You know that if you put your hand in the cookie jar, you might get a scolding, so that's how I kind of always related it to.
Great
I
example.
Look at it. Now, I do think, in his presence, we will tremble and drop to our knees, because that's that awesome.
Exactly.
Honest.
Right on.
But yeah, I know I've come across people who's like, well, what kind of God would want us to fear him? So I think when we talk about fear, there's definitely context for different discussions with it.
Maybe in a little different definition, type of fear. 'Cause it's
Good point.
More fear of like respect.
Yes.
or
Yes.
reverence,
Yes.
Not physical, like.
Not like, oh my gosh, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But I'm in awe. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, It is in First John chapter 4, I believe, where it says. It's the problem of having a new Bible. All your underlines and notes are in another one. Yeah, First John 4:18. There is no fear in love, but perfect love drives out fear. Because fear involves punishment. One who fears is not perfected in love. So the more we are living in God's perfect love, the more that fear will be driven out. If he is for us, who can be against us? All those thoughts. Along these lines, Jonathan Kahn also references Proverbs 28. And the Proverbs are great about, they're kind of like, not to, I don't say this to lack reverence for God and his word, but a lot of the Proverbs almost sound like fortune cookies, or they're like little couplets, little two sentence comparisons, contrast snippets. Yeah. And so this collection of these thoughts in Proverbs 28, verse 1, these two contrasts tie into what we're talking about here. On the one hand, Proverbs 28:1, the wicked flee when no one is pursuing, but the flip side, the righteous are bold as a lion. Now, yes, we're told meek will inherit the earth, but that's a spiritual meekness, but we also have a spiritual boldness because we're meek in the presence of God and we're not arrogant, but we're also bold, knowing whose we are and who empowers us and giving him the credit and the glory and seeing him as the source of all that. With the Lion of Judah as our source, we can be bold as a lion ourselves, as long as we stay in line with him and don't step outside of that. So that makes sense. Yeah. Anything else on fear and evil and power and temporary and eternal and all that stuff? No. We move on to the next little bit of the Josiah Manifesto. Click. You probably heard this analogy before, but it's appropriate. A candle in the daylight can hardly be seen, but the candle that shines at night lights up the dark. The righteous of this hour must shine as a candle in the night against the darkness to light up the night. So the initial concept thought there, it makes sense. Candle in the daylight, okay, yeah, but at night, okay, there's more of a contrast now. So what are his thoughts on this and bringing this out? To stand for God in a Judeo-Christian culture is to shine as a candle in the daylight. Judeo-Christian culture, if that's what's dominant, what's happening, that's great. And if you are standing for God in that, you're a candle, but you're a candle surrounded by daylight. Not a bad thing, not a bad place to be, but to stand for God in a post-Christian or anti-Christian culture is to shine as a candle in the night. When the world is going more in a dark direction and we stay true to the light within ourselves, we're going to stand out more. And that's the job. The light that shines at night does not blend into its surroundings, but stands apart from them and against them. Again, it's supposed to be a contrast. While we want to be in the world but not of it, there needs to be enough of a distinction to where it's clear we are children of light, seeking that light despite our sins and imperfections. And we are always aiming towards that perfection and improving and confessing and getting grace and forgiveness and overcoming. But we don't allow our humanity to cause us to compromise Christ, to point to where we're not any different from the world around us, or we're blending in too much. All things to all people doesn't mean compromising Christ. And so there's kind of the difference there. Reactions or thoughts on this concept? Pretty straightforward. Yeah. Yeah, you can, don't hide your light so it's not seen. Yeah. And here's the beautiful thing, and this will be brought out as we go. When we talk about, oh, the world's going this way, so we better, what we're saying is, if you're already doing the right thing and keep doing the right thing, You're not going to have to be a spectacle. You're not going to have to be causing riots and sensations. Just standing for God, the more the world goes away from God, that's going to be, as he'll say, a radical thing. Just do the right thing always, whether in good circumstances and not so good circumstances. Be that light and live in that light. Don't hide it under a bushel, as Sister Carolyn brought out from the scripture, because then it kind of defeats the purpose. So don't be afraid to bring it out and let your light so shine, but let it shine regardless of the environment. And let's not say, oh, because I'm in a good environment, I'm in a church environment, I can lessen my light because it's less needed. No, that's part of the environment. That's a good part of the environment. Let's all keep that fire burning. But it's when we're not surrounded by that. I had experience where in the Navy, so I get out of boot camp in Orlando, I'm going to school in Orlando, hanging around with my Pentecostal group after I'd had my Catholic childhood. Good people, love the Lord, and I'm just, spiritually flopping and figuring myself out. I'm 19 years old. Well, the end of 1989, as I'm 19 years old, and I'm getting assigned to my new station after graduating my schooling. I'm going to work in Connecticut. I get a place to live in Massachusetts. So I thought that was cool, living across the state line and going to work in another state. But anyway, it was such a change for me going from my warm bubble of my friends in the church that I was visiting. And while some of them did go over there too, it was just for some reason, maybe it's because it's Yankee, I don't know. But for some reason, not saying there were good people there, but there was a difference. And I felt less of the light. And so it was an adjustment for me. I couldn't ride on and thrive on the light of those around me as much as I had before. I was a little out of that bubble. I was a little more having to rely on my own, and I didn't have as much because I've been relying on others. So it was a definite growing pain for me. So you kind of see the point here, how our environment can change, can impact how much we let our light shine. And so, of course, Christian character and integrity under God is how we let that light shine doesn't change based on environment. So something I had to learn and adapt to in my own experience. So next section here, a little bit. Before I read this, one thought here. The removal of compromise, apathy, and impurity from God's people. These are things that are going to be needed as things progress. As we see, as we'll talk about here, the darkness getting more dark, therefore the light will be more light. He uses the phrase losing the gray or going against the gray. So here's his thoughts. In an age of polarization, when the darkness is purging itself of its grayness to become wholly dark, the light must likewise purge itself of its own grayness to become wholly light. If the darkness is to become darker, the lights must shine all the more bright. So falling away from the gray, letting go of the gray on both sides. We clearly see it happening on the darkness side, just with one example I mentioned earlier with the scouts. Okay, there's more emboldenedness to take off the covers and go further out there, where that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. And so things that were kept a little more gray, a little more ambiguous, less and less, it's just going more and more out there. Which means the call for us, removal of compromise, giving in, going along to get along, apathy, not caring as much as we should, not being as engaged and involved as we should, impurity, allowing ourselves to be internally compromised and spiritually compromised to where we're of less effect. So we've got to remove compromise, we've got to remove apathy and impurity in this age that's losing its gray, because as evil and darkness, and again, we know it's not flesh and blood we're wrestling against, it's the spiritual powers behind the scenes, but as they're going for it more and more and throwing off the gray and going more and more dark, we don't have the luxury of hanging around in the gray ourselves. The time is for us to shed that and get more zeroed in and honed in on that light. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward.
I'm just thinking though about, the gray.
Yeah.
Because I have gray days,
Oh, sure.
right? I have days where I wake up and I just don't feel like a little ray of sunshine, right?
Yeah.
Say it isn't so.
Seriously, and especially with all the brain fog, from this
Yeah.
menopause brain fog that I have.
That's my excuse.
Sometimes I struggle just to, put myself out there, but even though I think I have to, you have to be gentle with yourself and not too hard on yourself, because sometimes you just need a day of rest.
Sure.
But at the same time, it feels better to be light, or to seek
Right
the
on.
light,
Right
I
on.
mean, sometimes I think we're very monotone
Mhm.
or it's just lather, rinse, repeat,
Creatures of habit.
creatures of habit, and it's kind of like when you stay inside all day and then you go outside and it's bright. Oh my goodness,
Or you come inside here for a movie night.
Yeah. Right. The things that we know we should do, we don't do, but it's like healthy eating too.
Yeah.
I always feel better when I eat a salad, but boy, I sure wanted, ice cream, the other night or whatever. So I just, talking about the gray, I can see that kind of being like that lukewarm
Absolutely.
deal that the Lord talks about, you're not hot, you're not cold, and it just,
Spit it out. Yeah.
but like I say, some days, you can't help it.
Yeah.
But also I was in Winco a couple weeks ago and I was having a bad day, my back hurt, my feet hurt, but I had to go shopping. So they had a big old box of like discount books. So I'm like, oh, let me go see what's over here, because Winco loves to have us buy everything else except, groceries, right? So I'm looking through this book or this box and I'm humming to myself. I'm just humming, I'm humming. This lady in this wheelchair comes up, she comes rolling up and she's looking, and I'm just doing my thing. And she says, you must be having a good day today. She's in a wheelchair, and I'm like, well, I'm trying, I mean, I didn't know what to say, and she says, well, you sound happy. And I said, well, actually, I woke up this morning and I'm not feeling real good, but I'm determined to have a good day. I'm hoping that I can kind of lift myself out of this. And she's in a wheelchair, and she says, she looks at me, she says, yep, she says, attitude, it's all about your attitude. And then she wheels herself off.
So you push her down the stairs.
I was just kind of like, oh my goodness, and did it make me feel better? It made me feel more aware, it made me feel more aware. Here she is in a wheelchair and I'm complaining about, my back hurts and my feet hurts and, what kind of, I gotta go to the grocery store and I hate Winco because Winco hurts my face, and all this stuff, so, yeah.
So someone who couldn't be lifted up physically, he lifted up in other ways. A lot of you realize that. Yeah.
I thought, wow, it was just kind of that reality check,
Mhm.
wow.
And sometimes just those little things, whether it's humming or whether it's, playing out just the notes of a song. Oh yeah, I know what hymn that is now, like we were doing before services started.
Yeah.
So Sunday, we have a youth activity, right? And Eric decided instead of name that tune, it was the verse. And so we got points based on, he started with like the fourth, and then he would go to the third and the second, and we had to name the song based.
That's how he told it.
We
That's
failed.
how he told it.
Well, yeah,
Well, how he said it.
we failed, but no.
Well, I didn't say it like the music goes, while traveling through this land of sorrow.
But it's surprisingly tough. It was a lot of fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And you're sitting there and you might know the verse, but then
We didn't know the title.
you're like, what's the title? Many knew the numbers.
But you didn't know the title.
Yeah,
Looking
But
for
it,
the
like,
Bible.
how often pay attention, right, to that third verse or that fourth verse, you know, I mean, but we all got some points though, I mean, we all got.
Did very good on the first verse.
The most enjoyable part for me was standing up here, seeing everyone's face going, I know this. I know this. And then, oh, it's so close. What is it? Was it? I mean, Alyssa even sticking her hands out there. Oh, I know it.
Like, you people just doing it, we just do it, and she's getting into it, you know, so.
But
it's
yeah,
fun.
even just,
Fun.
but to that point, even just being familiar with the hymns we sing in services and just, you know, humming along or whatever, something just to set our mind on things above.
Yes.
As we're told Thessalonians. It reminds us, because sometimes, here's what can happen. Lord knows I'm guilty of this way more often than I need to be. Sometimes we get up, we do our morning routine, we go to our jobs or whatever, we go do our typical day thing. We're focused on what we gotta do, do this, come home, dinner, household chores, get everything situated, go to bed, okay, yeah, and then where was God in any of it? Where was anything spiritual or anything edifying or uplifting, or was it just 16 tons and what do you get? Yeah, another day older and deeper and dead. You know, was it just thank you, Tennessee Ernie Ford? Yes.
I know that song.
Yes, my Lon Lefebvre did a great version of it too, really jazzed up. But anyway, yeah. So like I said, I'm guilty of that way too many times, even in recent times here. So where you're focused on what's in front of you, and before you know it, the day is gone. We know that every day is a gift, and any day that we don't allow ourselves, any day that we don't proactively, I mean, talk about self-care, how about self-spirit care? Any day that we don't remind ourselves of God's goodness, his grace, his love, the whole joy of life. Christ said, I came that they might have life and have it more abundantly. That means not only have life, but have that quality of life, that enjoyment of life. If you do something silly or recreational or whatever, that's enjoying life. Life is meant to be enjoyed, to be good experiences. Don't let your days go by lacking good experiences. One of my favorite, I'm so glad Brother Clay is here this Wednesday night. Many times he's not here on a Wednesday night. One of my favorite things of Wednesday night is these lovebirds having FaceTime on the church computer here. I'm happy they're happy. Who am I to stand in the way of that? That's great. But that's what I'm talking about. Just that little extra, being able to see each other while they're away from each other. That, and to be able to do that while we're having church together or before, after church. I mean, that's great. These are the kind of things we're talking about. Keep ourselves going and don't let ourselves get so bogged down. We talked about before in earlier sessions how Satan's so successful in just kind of chipping away, dragging us away, or things that just suck all the life and energy out of us before we know it. We've got nothing left for anything productive or beneficial or happy. And so, yeah. So all the more, while evil is going full bore its way, it's good time for us to get our spiritual Richard Simmons out and shake off the excess, shake off the gray, and get a little more into the life and feel good about it. As I talked the other Sunday in one of the messages about, to Sister Ashley's point, we know what it's like when we eat something that's actually decent for us and we can feel our body say, thank you. Well, how about doing something to where you feel your spirit afterwards say, thank you. Yeah, credit goes to the church and to the Lord, of course. But our guest preacher, I hear, made a visit to Lowe's and mentioned again how much they were blessed to enjoy the day with us.
I went by the church. It's a big church.
Oh, yeah. Neat old building from 1906 or something like that.
I just saw from
Yeah.
the side, it goes from one corner to the next corner, but their blocks is not as big as ours, but it does, goes from one corner to the next. And then the back is the parking, it's just 2 stories.
Hmm.
But he said, yeah, he really enjoyed it. He said he had a lot of fun, especially he enjoyed the activities.
I'm gonna go to that church if there's ever a zombie apocalypse, because I don't think anybody could get into that. It looks solid. It's right down from the church, the other church where the foot club is. And it takes up a whole block.
Yeah. But that's just another example of being uplifted. and being involved in things that keep you uplifted. Also blessed to hear Sister Roberta say that how great it was for her to be able to be there for both services and be there for the full day together. Yeah, when that can happen, we obviously know when there are times when it can't happen, much to our frustration to all of us, but soak it up as much as you can. So with that, winding down here for this evening. No matter what the circumstances, no matter what the culture, no matter what the odds, there's always a way to fulfill the will of God. There's always a way to overcome. There's always a way to glorify Him. There's always a way to live victoriously and prevail. Now, that sounds like super happy sunshine stuff. Is this real? Is this God's honest, real truth? We know in our hearts and spirits, yes, it is. How do we make that real? How do we make that happen? No matter what the circumstances, no matter what the culture, no matter what the odds. So might not be in the greatest circumstances, might not be in the greatest environment, might not, no matter what the odds, might not look like things are likely going to turn out well in the short term here. No matter what external things, there's always a way to fulfill the will of God. How? What if the will of God, I would think, would be for me to accomplish and overcome all these things? You know, all these things are lined up against us. Then little old me under God is supposed to go out there and conquer all those things and overcome all those things. That is not necessarily the will of God. You ever hear the analogy where God tells someone to push this stone and get it up this hill, and he's pushing and pushing and pushing, and the instructions are, see the stone at the bottom of this hill, see the top of that hill? Yeah, you push that stone. Okay, I'm going to push against the stone, pushing, and the guy's not getting it to budge an inch, or if it rolls up a little bit, it rolls right back down. We know that feeling. And so at the end of however long it was, you know, God comes back, and the guy says, God, I tried with all my might. I could not get that stone up there. And God says, who said anything about getting the stone up there? That wasn't the objective. I just told you to push against it. Look, check out your muscles, dude. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but sometimes, what's the moral of the story? Sometimes the objective isn't always what we would think it is. It's not necessarily that we've got to conquer the world and overcome all these things. Sometimes the objective is just staying true to God in that environment. And that's, again, that light shining. Sometimes it's more our building character, yes, but it's true. It's our spiritual character, our strength, our endurance. What does Scripture say? Yeah, count it all joy when you go through these various trials. Doesn't say count the trials joy, count it joy when, because these things produce all these things, and the list goes on. You know, produces perseverance, endurance, and all these things so that you will be more equipped and strengthened to overcome. So we can fulfill the will of God just by standing still and being true to God in the constantly shifting, changing environment around us. We can accomplish the will of God. There's always a way to overcome. Sometimes overcoming is simply not being overcome by the evil around us. That's a victory. That's overcoming. Let's not miss that. There's always a way to glorify Him. Not going along and giving in, that gives glory to God. Standing your ground. One of our themes from one of the chapters of Romans is grace in which we stand. We stand in His grace, that's glorifying to Him, because we know it's not in our own strength or abilities. It's His grace we stand in, but we stand, and He causes us to stand. There's always a way to live victoriously and prevail. To prevail simply means to last, to endure. When all said and done, to be still standing. That's what the Lord has for us. So even when things seem overwhelming, don't think that it's your job to overcome and subdue all of that. It's not to get all of that to bow down under you, under God. It's to make sure you are still standing and not allowing that to bow you down. See the difference there? Yeah.
Just reading that, came to mind Paul in chains and prison.
Yeah.
And sitting there singing hymns.
Yeah, Philippians 16. And Philippians 16, Acts 16 in Philippi. Yes, yes. And guess what? All the other dudes were listening. He had a captive audience. They were in a state of being, state of mind, and state of being to where, you know what? Kind of refreshing and nice hearing someone sing one of them church songs. You know, nice to have something a little uplifting in that environment. Absolutely. And look how God honored that. They didn't break their chains. God did. And it was, what did God honor? He honored their finding a reason to glorify him even in their circumstances. Perfect example, Brother Clay. Thank you for that. Let's see. Let's do this one more here. The believer must act as a counterweight and counterforce to an apostate and darkened civilization. In the face of a radically evil culture, the believer must become radically good.
It's radically good.
What's radically good? It's not just good, Brother Clay. It's radically good. What's it mean to be radical?
Crazy, insane.
Crazy, insane. That's certainly some radicals are. But what's the opposite of radical? Calm. To be radical, it's like dynamic and static. Static is motionless. Dynamic just means moving. And so a dynamic speaker is someone who's, hey, lively and moving and engaging, or static, monotone. So to be radical is to be different, is to be outside the norm. So normal, common is one end, radical is the other. Now, you could be radically one way, radically other. Forgive me. But when I hear radical right, politically speaking, well, what is the right supposed to be about? Limited government. How radical limited government can you get? Yeah, when they talk about radical right and racism, well, there's nothing racist about what the right's supposed to be about. So if you're talking about, that's not right. That's not. So people talk about these things without getting the concept. Barry Goldwater famously said, and I agree with the sentiment, radicalism toward, and I'm paraphrasing horribly, but basically being radical for the Constitution is not extreme at all. Understanding the Constitution and the Declaration, being founded under God, being radical about those things is not an extreme thing. And so, yeah, go ahead.
Radical and fanatical.
Yeah.
Because doesn't everybody get the first thing, usually radical?
Yeah.
Get a negative.
Absolutely, you're so right.
Because they're over zealous, they're over.
Yes.
And I just, like the first one is we're not to fear evil. But that, now we're be radical and face it.
Now, that doesn't mean being, as Sister Leslie said, being crazy and a fruit and a nut and out there. I know in California and you are what you eat, but you get the idea here. Radical here in the context just means, by definition of the word, not normal. Free radicals in the body. Well, those radicals are things that are outside the norm of what's in there and need to be removed, too much oxygen or whatever. And so the idea here is we're used to hearing radicals as good, but radical by definition just means not part of the pack. And so if the pack, is going off the bridge, don't go off the bridge with the pack. Be radically against the pack that's going off the bridge. So it's the best way to understand radical is compared with what? What are you comparing radical to? I might say that me standing alone is normal, and all the world going off a cliff, to me, that's radical, even if it's the most popular thing. So what's our definition of radical? And what are we basing it on? What's our baseline that for normal, to which anything beyond that would be considered radical? So in his context here, what I understand him to be saying, and he gives examples, Moses was a counterforce to Egypt, Elijah to Ahab and Jezebel, and the Apostle Paul to Rome. And so being counterforces to what's popularly happening is to be a radical in contrast to what's popularly happening. Doesn't mean you have to be a wacko or a nut job. In fact, that really hurts your case and your cause. What was it, Westfield or whatever the name was, those Baptists that were protesting at funeral. The horrible stuff, man. That's not us. you're giving us a really bad name. That's radically negative. That's not helping the cause. We are to be light and love, and we don't compromise on our stand on evil, but we love despite the evil. And so the idea here is, as things get radically evil, or not falling in with that is going to be a radical contrast. So that's the context he's talking from. And sadly, unfortunately, you're so right. When we first hear that, it's like, uh-oh, now we're going to be a cult. Now we're going to be, no. Everyone can freely walk away and go be about your business anytime. There's accountability for God for the vow and all, but we don't hold anyone here with a gun to their head or anything like that. None of this cult stuff here, but the idea here is we are so freely, voluntarily choosing to stay resolved with the Lord and with each other and his word and his truth, that even when doing so makes us radically different from anyone and everyone else, we're okay with that. We would rather be true with God and have God be our norm than be out doing things that are spiritually radical and not okay with God, to be normal and not considered a radical by the world. The world calls you a radical for, I mean, I know it's not a very pleasing term to some, but the phrase Jesus freak, people sometimes see it as kind of, what's that? Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, I care that much. I love the Lord that much. I mean, I still function and take care of my daily responsibilities and everything. But here's the idea. What is the baseline of your life? If God is not the baseline of our life, then we are going to be sucked in by a world going radically against him. If God is our baseline, then we're going to be radically different from a world radically departing from it, Sister Peggy.
Not just get into the subject about myself, but reading this and sitting here and really thinking on it, I'm still battling with Elmer Roosevelt, where Britain's going.
Yes.
And so we have our IEP meeting coming up on the 20th, and it's been really hard because ever since I made Brennan's EC mad, because we had that confrontation, her and I did.
What's the EC stand for?
Educational coordinator.
Thank you.
Brennan's grade is just start dropping, and everyone that she's a common denominator with, this is happening. I've caught 3 ECs in lies, straight up lies. I even confronted one of them. And I said, explain this to me. Because it's not, it can't happen. She was trying to tell me, because she graded Brennan on one of his grades. He got all the points. 2 months later, after this whole argument happened with his EC, she took the grade away.
What?
And gave him a 0.
What?
So I reached out to her through an email and I said, hey, what's this? And she's like, oh, well, it was a computer glitch, and the computer automatically graded his paper. But I couldn't find it in my box, so I had to take the grade. I took the grade away. Well, first of all, the paperwork was done on paper, not online. She specified on paper.
So how did the computer grade a paper?
So I went down and met with her and I said, now you need to explain this to me. I said, because how does a computer grade a child on paperwork that was turned in on paper and gave him full credit? Now you're pulling it and you told me it was a computer glitch. She goes, well, no, it was actually me. I couldn't find his paper in the box, so I had to take his grade away and gave him a 0 on it. That was 2 months ago. I said, so now it's your word against his because it was turned in on paper. And so I'm really, it's taking everything I have. I'm being very radically good right now. Because it's not in my character. just want to call all of them out on their stuff. And my daughter, who I've been venting on, she's like, this is so not like you. I said, I've got to hold my tongue until I see what happens with the IEP.
Mhm.
I don't want that to go sideways. And I said, so I'm praying on it. And I'm just trying to keep myself calm. And it didn't go in as far as one essay. Brendan did plagiarize an essay, his first one.
Okay.
Okay, we had a meeting, he goes, it was totally he just,
Stupid.
yes. And I said, okay. And he goes, so he needs to redo it.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But it was right after all of this stuff is happening, right? So I took the computer away, Brennan and I sat down together. He told me what he wanted his topic to be. I wrote it out myself. And I knew that it was not plagiarized in any way. He turns that in. When I was in the hospital, Carlos had to go down for a meeting and they told him that one was plagiarized. Well, I didn't tell Carlos that I had help Brennan. So the other day we're in the car and Carlos was like, well, he has to redo that. I said, no, he doesn't. He goes, he has to redo that because he plagiarized that again. And I said, no, he didn't. He
From
goes,
where?
how come you're saying he didn't? He didn't. I said, because I helped him with it. I wrote it.
So he didn't plagiarize, he cheated. Mom wrote it.
Well, and
I'm joking, of course. What exactly? But the point is, they were his original thoughts. They were plagiarized. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it was in his words, what he wanted, and I wrote it.
Mhm.
And,
Took dictation and put it, yeah.
but they totally lied. They lied on it again. And I'm
You can't be guilty of plagiarizing if they can't cite the source you plagiarized.
Exactly. And so I'm holding my tongue. I'm so holding my tongue. And I'm waiting how this is, like I said, on the 20th, please keep us in prayer.
Sure.
I really hope and pray that it goes in Brennan's favor and we get the IEP because he really does need it. And,
What's that stand for? Forgive me, I'm out of the loop on the lingo. No worries.
Like some individual education
yeah,
plan or something like that.
or it just kind of makes things a little bit more simplified.
Okay.
And so if he's in the 10th grade and maybe he's at a 9th grade level, he's allowed to do that 9th grade level at a 10th, but he's in the 10th.
Yeah, build up to from where he's
it
at.
just makes
Okay.
it a little bit smoother
Okay.
for kids.
So
And there's
yeah.
more resources.
Gotcha. So what I'm hearing from you is that as we're talking here, that you're finding yourself in a situation where you're trying to decide, do I maintain my Christian dignity and character and hold off, even though I'm within my rights to act on this? Maybe it's wiser and more spiritual discernment there's a time and a place and a more appropriate, and making sure you don't want to go off half-cocked and make things worse, especially for Brennan. And so, yeah, okay, yeah. So, yeah, being radically good, even when it's contrary to our own nature, because it's not in our nature. Yes.
One day we left and he was like, Mom, how are you feeling right now about Jessica? She's the one that's right. I never want to hear the word Jessica again in my life. And I go, he goes, how are you feeling about her right now? And I said, I want to go rip her face off. That's how I'm feeling about her right now. He's like, ooh. And I'm like, but that was my honest.
Don't mess with our kids.
You know, I was angry.
Yeah.
And I'm still angry because they're doing things to him that, I mean, he's home now because he doesn't have to be on campus.
Yeah.
But yeah, it got rough. It
Yeah.
got rough, and they're still trying to make things rough with messing with his race
Yeah.
when that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, and Alicia, my daughter, was saying, well, I still want you to, they don't really have a principal. She does overlook Eleanor Roosevelt. You could call her a principal, But she was like, she needs to know what's happening. And I said, I know, I said, but I still have to buy my time. It's not yet.
Yeah,
And I said, but yes, I do want to have a conversation with her after
yeah.
the fact.
Let's see how this plays out and get through it. See, and that's the thing. See, being a Christian doesn't mean we're a doormat or just roll over, but it means that we need to, our goal needs to be as effective as possible. And so that's timing and prayer and letting the Spirit lead and,
To be a professional, I mean, as
Yeah.
a Christian woman, but I
Yes.
would be- even though they're not acting like professionals,
yeah,
as they should, because they should,
yeah.
but I don't want to come across like that. I want to come across as being
Mhm.
respectful. And I am with all the emails, you know, and all the things. I'm very professional. And, because I don't want them to be able to say, but this or that. No, I'm not giving you any room at all
Right on.
in any way. But it's hard because it's a very dark school, very
Wow.
dark kids and very dark surroundings.
And this is an improvement over where he would be otherwise.
Right.
That's the sad thing.
And that's the sad, thing, yes. And, so it is, and Brennan's talked to me about, it's hard being the only light there.
Yeah.
You know, and I said, I know, I said, but the world was that way as well.
Yeah.
We still have to be that light, you know, and he goes, no, I am, and I want to, because it's just, it gets heavy sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why we have to, as I say, as we're winding down here for this evening, one of the things I talk with Ashley about a lot is replacing the bad with the good. Okay, we've been impacted by the bad. Okay, are we gonna go to bed and that's been the majority impact on us for the day? Or are we gonna take enough of a moment to where, okay, let's fill it with something good? Ashley mentioned to me, don't mind sharing, it's trivial enough. Being kind of bogged down by the day the other day. So I said, well, when we come home tonight, let's do something that's happy. Let's make sure we do something specifically happy to kind of wash that out and end on a good note, on a happy note. And you know, who doesn't need that or couldn't use that? And so I think again, and especially so pray for Brennan and our brother Brennan in all these situations and our kids in school and all that. I'm proud of them for being the light that they are in their environments, but also they're affected by their environment. And so may we as family, parents, church, and all that stuff be an encouragement to them, a source of light and hope for them. And to know that as we're called here, don't worry about how dark it gets out there. Just draw close to the light and the people of light and we'll be okay. In fact, we'll be a draw for others to want to come to. And that's where we get into the being proactive and all that. So good, any place for tonight, unless any other final thoughts from anyone? Questions, comments, all good? All right, so we'll go ahead and stop our screen share here. And we'll stop our recording for the evening session and let's go ahead and stand and prepare to meet in the center, close out in our season of prayer.